I sort of fall down on the side of I understand what the government are doing in removing the loophole and imposing VAT, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm really interested to hear your views because I don't think it's as clear cut as saying you either love it or you hate it. But anyway, we'll come back to your calls on that in just a second. We have to move on to some pretty grim news as this sort of period after October the 7th, another key event today where the bodies of 4 Israeli hostages handed over by Hamas, and the scenes of them parading coffins and pictures of Benjamin Netanyahu with fangs and the blood sort of dripping down onto pictures of the families was just horrific. And I have to say, looking at some of the images, they were quite shocking, really. Let's speak with Chris Doyle, who is a commentator on Middle East politics and director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding. Chris, thank you for joining us as ever. We'll come on to what has happened in Israel in the last hour or so in just a moment. But first, on the scenes we saw today, why did Hamas, do you imagine, decide this would be an appropriate thing to do? I mean, who is this winning to their cause?
It's very hard to tell. It's very clear in international law, and I think by any common measure of decency, that you should treat bodies and corpses with respect, as you should indeed prisoners of war, detainees and hostages. And that certainly wasn't the case today. There was a parade, it was macabre, and it's very unclear who really is impressed by all of that. But actually, at a broader level, and I think it's necessary to give, wider context of this, the treatment of dead bodies in this conflict has been very grisly. We see the 4 today, Israeli hostages. I mean, back in September, 89 Palestinian bodies were just dumped by the Israelis. 80 in August and 100 in January. There were even some medical reports suggesting that organs had been removed and cemeteries had been raised in Gaza. So I do think a slightly fuller, I'm not talking about yourself, but the fuller media coverage might also reflect that, the way in which Israeli authorities have also, for example, for a long time, not just over the last 16 months, held back bodies from Palestinian relatives. This does not, though, and I'm going to really emphasize this, excuse the way that Hamas conducted itself today. It doesn't do that. I just urge all parties, no matter, what particular brand of politics or nationality, to treat, prisoners and hostages and bodies with respect, because the trauma of the loved ones is obviously very palpable, very real, and very deep.
And it was, I mean, the scenes, as I said, was almost like a sort of public, it was almost a sort of weird sort of concert that they'd put on. It was really disgusting the way it was done. Do you think this will affect future hostage deals? Because we've seen this promise of perhaps 6 hostages to be exchanged on Saturday for Palestinian prisoners. I mean, do you think this will have any bearing on that?
I would hope not. I think that whilst there will be a lot of disgust about this, I think that the desire to get more hostages released will be intense within Israel, and Palestinians will want to see prisoners and detainees released themselves as well. So I think there will be a motivation to go forward, particularly the Saturday deal. But the key thing, and really what matters, is the deal as it stands. The first phase of it ends on the 1st of March, and there are negotiations now about how to kickstart the second phase. And it is this point that we may see, unfortunately, the breakdown of this deal. This is a key moment because there are a number within the Israeli cabinet who are pushing to resume full-scale military operations in Gaza. I mean, we've seen a massive decline in those military operations, not total. So it's a real risk. And it comes, of course, after those comments by President Trump saying that Gaza should be emptied and the people not allowed back, which has been seen by the far right and people within the Israeli government as a green light to go forward in Gaza and, in the words of Netanyahu, the Prime Minister, to destroy Hamas, however that can be achieved, which is seemingly, to my mind, and I think most observers, not an achievable military objective. So I think that Hamas has said that it is prepared to bring forward some of these hostage release deals. I think that shows a confidence that it believes the second phase will go forward. But everything here is extremely delicate. It's fragile. There's no trust between the sides. There's a lot of fear on all parties. And I think that we need to exert the maximum amount of pressure from the outside to ensure that we don't get back to the atrocities that we've been seeing over the last 16 months. I think, in particular for the people of Gaza who've suffered so much, being brought to the point of starvation and what many people, including myself, would call a genocide, they cannot, of course, stomach yet more. And, it's really alarming to see where this might go.
And could I get your reaction, lastly, to this news that is coming out of Bat Yam in Tel Aviv, where 3 buses have exploded in Israel in a suspected terror attack? Again, the Israelis cannot put up with much more of this either. You said about people in Gaza.
I couldn't agree more. The good news, if you can call it that, is there doesn't appear to be any casualties, that they were empty. The Israeli authorities are saying that they believe that they were meant to have gone off tomorrow morning, and didn't. But it looks like, if there is any sort of faint claim to this, there was a brigade in Tulkarem, which is in the northern part of the West Bank, because the slightly less reported part of what's going on at the moment have been Israeli operations over the last month in the northern part of the West Bank, and that this brigade came from Tulkarem, which is one of the areas that has been hit. I rather fear that we may see more such attacks, maybe lone wolf attacks or whatever, within Israel, and we will probably see certainly an escalation in the West Bank. In fact, I've said in 2025 we're likely to see the core central part of this conflict move to the West Bank.
Thank you very much for your time. That's Chris Doyle, a commentator on Middle Eastern politics and director of the Council for Arab British Understanding.